Said he's online.
online.
Yeah.
Not seeing another participant. We are live streaming. So unless he's on YouTube.
I mean, I would imagine he would know the difference.
Did you want me to show you my YouTube, my U-turn photo, Angela?
You go to Jim. You keep it on.
There he is.
Oh, geez.
I was
That's a
just
fright,
emailing you.
that's a frightening picture there, Nick.
Hello,
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I gotta echo. Hold on one second. I gotta close out YouTube, sorry.
Like a really long.
There we go.
Play.
All right, now I think we're good. So we're ready to start whenever you are, Jen.
Okay,
I think I have to move because Nick's staring right at me.
I'm only looking you all night, Roger.
Oh, there's just Nick's big looking over us.
Can you reduce this? Can you reduce him?
all right.
Does that make you feel better, Roger?
There you go.
I'll start by taking attendance. Nick, since you're start on lunch. Roger,
Yeah,
Steve,
Yeah.
Portia, your Craig.
Yep.
Chuck.
Yep.
Alan.
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. That's 8.
There's a bunch of other people on the list that I usually go through, but.
geez, we're almost down to the original number.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for coming. We have a couple of travelers that aren't with us today, but we'll fill them in later. The next item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes from March.
Oh, did I put February? Is that, did I get that wrong? Or did I print the wrong ones?
No, you.
No, I printed the wrong ones. Never mind.
Oh,
Okay.
the email, the agenda is
Yeah.
right in the one that you emailed.
Okay.
Yes, any questions or comments on that? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
No, I didn't know if you had comments. You were looking at.
No, I just didn't know if I could vote, because or wasn't that?
Yeah, you don't have to. I believe 4 is a quorum and Nick is actually a voting member, so.
I'll second.
So who motioned?
I thought I heard Roger motion it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so we will vote. Steve? All in favor of
I was absent.
minute? Okay. Roger?
Yes,
Chuck,
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes,
And me, yes.
can I make a suggestion? I mentioned this too. I may have mentioned it to you about the recording on this. With, because, Jen speaks so softly.
To here.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, I wonder whether you might want to move up.
sure.
You want to move here and Nick can stare at you.
Nick,
Um,
can you hear me okay?
Oh, you're mute.
You-
I can now, yes.
okay,
As
I
long as
can,
you speak up.
I can speak.
Okay, all right.
I was a
Yeah, it
captain.
is soft. Roger's right. It is soft.
Okay,
And you're so far away, you know.
yeah, it's true. I picked like.
Should we move this down that way a bit?
Yeah, I think Steve and I can call out.
Yeah, okay.
Don't worry.
All right, good.
Steve's not done.
So the item number 3 on this agenda is discussion about the Vision Zero action plan.
So I can give you an update. I was hoping that there is a staff member at GPCOG that's spearheading their action plan right now. They are in the middle of drafting that's going to the PACS policy committee in, I believe, May. And so she's been providing some public outreach, and then also there's some good data behind what they're doing about trying to make, safe streets and different action plans for the region. So we'll all be able to incorporate that into some of our policies or benefit from future grants that are going to be coming out for Safe Streets for All grants will be coming out after that gets finalized. And so I just kind of wanted to lay some groundwork. She unfortunately not able to be here tonight after all, and but it's providing me with a lot of information. One piece I will probably be putting in our talking traffic that goes in the newsletter and is also on social media that this group kind of came out of this committee. I will probably start putting some of that information out there through that venue, and it will be on a future agenda, I would think, just so that we can have it, I think, in mind as we walk through our townwide transportation study. I think safety and factors just need to play into kind of in the back of our head for everything we talk about. I think it's a good thing to try to have some of that information, and then also how we engage the public and looking at our plan, things like that. I think it's probably good to educate this group a little more on that. And I think it will help as we kind of move through the bigger process for the study. I know we touched base on it, I think the last meeting or even the one before, and Jen kind of gave a rundown, some of the committee work you've been a part of with
Yeah.
that, right?
Yes, so it's Belinda Ray, who is she's the staff person at GPCOG who is heading up this Vision Zero effort, and she is a former Portland City Councilor, so she's very well versed in sort of this level of policy making, which is really helpful. She's a good big picture thinker, I think. And yes, so we did talk previously before about like Vision Zero and sort of what that is. I will add to that I didn't follow closely enough to figure out how it went today, but there was legislation presented in Augusta today to propose a Vision Zero plan at the statewide level. We are involved in it at the regional level because GPCOG is taking it on. Portland, even as a city, is a little bit too small sort of to do this kind of planning effort. And so it's appropriate then for sort of the larger metro region, it's not really metro, but you get the idea, to look at a little more holistically. And at that point, GPCOG is the regional transportation and PAC planners, so that's logical on their end. And I suspect that once a plan is adopted, which I believe it will be, it's in development right now, the state may look to that actually even as a model to be used on a broader basis. But anyway, all of those points that Angela brought up are good ones. My understanding and my involvement in this to date is generally that it's a sort of a clarified approach to addressing safety issues. So like we said before, the goal of the Vision Zero program is to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries on our transportation network. And that comes, there's a Belinda, I'm sad that she couldn't be here because she has a really great presentation material and it's in a very digestible way as
It
opposed
is.
to me just kind
Yeah, I
of
had,
not
so
doing that.
she presented to the PACS policy committee, and like you said, it's very much in layman's terms and
Right.
digestible in
It's
the way
like
she's
5
presenting it.
elements of it.
So she did provide me with a lot of information, including her slideshow, but she also, I think, would be interested in coming to this group, but was waiting to try to get some feedback through PACS first and the committees of PACS. So I think that might be, so I'm not saying she's not coming, it was just tonight, it did not work. for
Sure,
her. So
and I would,
she's back from vacation or something, so.
I would expect that at some point GPCOG will be doing this sort of outreach to all of its member communities because the initiative is being taken at sort of a more regional level. And so that means each community has to understand what it is what their opportunities are and how GPCOG and how this Vision Zero plan can benefit them. My sort of preview on that for this group is that it will come, this plan will come to us with, as Angela mentioned, an incredible amount of data. GPCOG employs full-time data analysts that have been working on this stuff for months already. And so they have a great groundwork set for really understanding, like when we talk about we in this group and sometimes people in the public, and I know sometimes it comes to counselors or however, to phone calls to Angela and all different ways. You know, the public says, hey, we need a crosswalk here because it's really unsafe to cross, or we need to do something else here because it's really unsafe. I've learned to not, you don't discredit that because it means someone's feeling unsafe, but what does actually unsafe mean? And so this this plan will really quantify that, and it will very clearly map out where there are documented locations with concrete safety bad safety track records. And then it will present sort of a menu of options on what communities can choose to help address those problems. And the last meeting that we had, there was some discussion. This hasn't been finalized necessarily, but there's been discussion around, there's a lot of federal money available so there's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of federal money available to help address some of those problems, which are often very expensive to address and many times like disproportionately expensive. So someone's just, we can't get to it, we can't do it because it's cost prohibitive. But there are some of those options now on the table. But if you can imagine, you know, if there were 6 communities in the GPCOG region that identified through data that there were, I keep using crossings, it applies to more than just crossings, but I'm going to use this as an example again anyway. If they had 6 crossings with a history of crash records or fatalities or serious injuries, and the correct mitigation for that was pairs of RFBs, rather than one community purchasing those and paying for someone to install them, in theory, like it could be looked at on sort of a more regional level, and maybe you buy 6 and you hire one contractor that goes to the different towns and plants, that kind of thing. Just as an example. And so the only twist to that is that the next round of applications for funding is due in July, which is very soon for funding applications. And it's also not going to be that much longer, like the schedule for when this whole plan thing even gets adopted is not going to leave a whole lot of time to iron out applications by that time. So that's something that I'm curious as under all the hats that I wear about how that's going to shake out and what that means for this community and others in the region. But we'll see. And as the plan gets rolled out and adopted, I'm confident it will come with more information about what's next? What's next?
Staff is getting a briefing. There is a meeting scheduled for the regional, I guess, engineers or public works officials, or maybe it might have been geared towards town managers now. I think about it. Tom just sent it to me and public works director, but to get the town managers on board with looking at that round of funding she's talking about. It's called Safe Streets for All grant, and trying to make sure so they're trying to get everybody ready for that opportunity, I think. So right now they've rolled it out to town managers, I believe. So Tom Wallace is on that list. And I believe that's next Friday.
Is that gonna require matching funds?
I don't know. That's why we're trying to get,
Yeah.
it's just infancy, so we'll
'Cause that
get
could-
more
That
information.
could throw a monkey wrench into everything,
Yeah.
because COG could have this.
Yep.
Regional thing, and all of a sudden it takes one or two communities to say,
It will very likely,
Most things do, require a match through PAX or
Yeah.
GCOG, yes.
and there's been talk at GPCOG about the timeline that thing brings with it, so. Any community, July might actually be like the worst possible timing for something like that to require a local match, because, so
Right, we
we
just finished the budget.
collectively, right, we just finished budget.
Yeah.
So at DPCOG, the panel for this has identified that basically if any community needs to provide a match of any sort of substance, it's basically adding a 1-year
Yeah.
time frame,
Right.
in order for that community to put that into their budgets and request it through their own council.
And I think with our timing anyway, I mean, I think our townwide study will inform a lot of things. That's what I'm hoping. And so we're a year anyway of identifying our hotspots and our action plans. So I think that would come together actually for us. Because we're not gonna be ready, like you said, this year, but we will be next year.
speaking of hotspots, do you take the information over at the planning board?
Mhm.
We get these traffic peer review,
Mhm.
and every once in a while it mentions high crash sites and things like that. Do you use that material, or do you get it from some other source?
Yeah, so that information comes from DOT and from the town, so
Yeah.
they get that from us.
They're getting it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought he was digging it up.
Well,
researching it.
DOT has that information and then it comes through from crashes that get collected through the police department and
Okay.
things like that. So
Okay.
it starts with us locally and then DOT collects that data.
Okay,
It's actually publicly available, so
It
there's a DOT map
Yep.
that you can go on and you can look at for Scarborough where it's capital high crash location, so it's a designated. It's not just locations that have a lot of crashes, there's like an equation that goes into it, and so anyone, that's available for anyone to look at. It's broken up into line segments and what they call nodes, which is really sort of intersection,
But it could be a driveway.
could be
you know,
driveway,
Yeah.
right?
Doesn't need
And
to be a major. intersection.
that information is part and parcel to the Vision Zero analysis.
Yeah, and so that was one of the figures she showed and when she was showing their data collection, you can see the heat map and the high crash areas kind of below. And Oak Hill is definitely our glowing intersection, and it's obviously from not just the intersection, but the legs, so it kind of, it emphasizes it more. It's not like it's one type of crash, right? So that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out what you do about that and having an opportunity to get grant money, I think it's important.
The good news, it's not the top 15 in the state. Like I was looking at that list the other day.
Yeah.
It had the list of, I think it was weird what number 1 was, and I can't remember, but none of Scarborough in the top 15, which I was like,
I think.
this was a little disappointing.
Yeah, and I think you'll find there's some that in like northern Maine stuff that might end up in the top 10 that you'd
Bangor
be
had like
surprised.
3.
Yeah, and I think it has to do also when you talk about, like percentage wise, you talk about a lower volume, percentage wise,
Yeah.
it might be a real big issue, right?
country
So,
winding road or something like that.
yeah,
And the severity matters, so,
Yeah.
Could be the weather too, you know. if you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
Further north.
right.
that's true too.
More like. Anyway.
I think where
So-
Nick lives is probably a high crash area.
Why do you say that? The up north,
He's barely in Scarborough.
It's mostly Gorham's problem, right?
Public meeting, held for each subregion. Ours was held in Saco. Or Biddeford, Biddeford Town Hall, City Hall. I know Tom Hall went to that, and it was getting public feedback as part of this process. So I think like that there'd be in Scarborough, so, so stay tuned. So you'll probably see that back. I'll check with Jen as that becomes available and see what she wants to do. Put that on agenda, future consideration.
And yeah, Nick, just a heads up, so my understanding from work on this panel is that the PACS policy committee, this Vision Zero plan will be presented to the PACS policy committee. And then this committee will vote to adopt the plan or not adopt the plan or amend it and then adopt it. And it's that adoption that's important for unlocking funds to be used in the region. It's not required that municipalities go on to adopt it themselves. So for example, Scarborough doesn't need to say in a formal way, we adopt this Vision Zero plan in order for us to be eligible for these Safe Streets for All grants, but it certainly would help. And it sort of it's helpful in terms of, you know, just communicating to the public a little bit more about what the intent is here. And if it's something that a community is in support of, that's sort of just another way to more, you know, more concretely voice support for the initiative, I guess. Yeah.
Are you, Nick, are you on, that policy committee? PACS policy?
I don't believe I'm on PAX, but I'm on GP Cogs.
Maybe it's
I'm-
not.
I'm a
So
liaison to GP Cog, right?
Okay, I think, there is a seat for policy and it was John Anderson and I didn't know if that changed. So I attend those meetings and vote for Scarborough and I guess I would like to, yeah, probably touch base with the council liaison on that, as this moves forward too.
I can find out if who's doing PAX.
Okay.
Good on Vision Zero? Any questions? No? Okay. Item 4 is the future of transportation chamber meeting update that Craig attended and is going to give us a rundown on.
Yeah. Pass these out, I don't know, I just took some notes on the phone as I was at this. Portland Chamber of Commerce event, it's been about 3 weeks, so not as fresh in my mind as it used to be, but. And feel free if you want to jump in and add any color or anything, but. So there was it's called an Eggs and Issues event, future of transportation, how we move around the region. So they had a panel of 4, I think, people, some from the town of Falmouth and some other varying agencies I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was kind of just felt a lot like a transportation committee meeting. A lot of the stuff they talked about was just stuff that we talk about here on a monthly basis. So I guess I'll just go through some of the bullet points I was taking down.
Nick, I'm emailing this to you right now. So that, can you hear us?
Yep.
So you should see it in your inbox, so you can follow along too. Sorry, Craig.
Oh, yeah. So try to add some color as well. So some of the impacts of COVID is increase in remote work. They provided some stats saying 3 times more remote work in Maine, where it's up to 4 times in Cumberland County. And even despite these, you'd think less road travel for commuting, traffic is already back at pre-pandemic levels. And even fatalities are up. They didn't really provide any insight of speculation on why. I don't know if it's just more irregular travel patterns or it could be anything, but that was one of the comments. Boom in bicycle sales, and one of the other changes in COVID. So significant increase in bicycle usage. I think a lot of people saw this as a COVID-friendly alternative, getting around, being outside. Public transit, however, they identified as something that hasn't recovered. For understandable reasons, it took a dip, especially early in the pandemic, due to just social distancing. And it just hasn't really bounced back to where it was. Although it seems like there are increased pushes for that to come. Kind of speaking to that, cities have used the pandemic as a way to rethink their downtown areas. Kind of just how cities have adopted outdoor dining, more pedestrian friendly roads. They highlighted some other areas that, based off maybe time of day, have just closed the cars in general. And just, how the pandemic has allowed people to take a step back and kind of think about how they want their urban areas to look like. Complete streets, they were talking for a bit. The Falmouth guy was talking about their Route 1 in Falmouth. I think we've referenced this a number of times as kind of a model that we look at. So yeah, he provided some insight and background on their thoughts with the bike lanes and protected sidewalks. Another piece to that, so there's big focus in Falmouth on preserving their green areas while driving growth to their designated growth areas, which they've identified as Route 1. You can see probably over the last couple of years how much of an increase in development just along their Route 1 corridor, where they have the established utilities in place. As far as pedestrian safety with cars, thought this was an interesting stat. So they kind of outlined the survival rates of pedestrians who are hit by cars at various speeds. Obviously, it's just a rough estimate, but 20 miles an hour, there's typically a 90% survival rate. When you go up to 30 miles an hour, that jumps up to 50-50. And then 40% or 40 miles an hour, if you're hit by a car, there's only a 10% survival rate. So it really just outlines, managing speeds around, pedestrian heavy areas. And if you want to keep, pedestrians safe, getting under 30 miles is pretty important. Rapid transit discussions. There were some talks about some whether buses, limited stop buses, dedicated bus lanes, some other options getting from the Gorham Westbrook into Portland. They showed a heat map of a couple different maps, one that outlined where people live in the state of Maine, and then one where people worked, and it was a pretty clear indicator, just Route 1. People work along Route 1, and that's how do you get people from where they live. It's increasingly more inland to where they work, and this bus route was one of them, and that kind of contrasts with the proposed Gorham connector. I think there was talking about potential cannibalization of riders if you're going to build an easy or a bus when you can just drive. So they're talking about the importance of working together on that to make sure there isn't any wasted efforts. And then the last part of the meeting was primarily focused on these old rail lines, and I don't know how familiar you guys are. I wasn't super familiar, but my understanding was there's these old rail lines that were used 100 years ago. They are now owned by the state or some other state agency, and there's just been a push to bring those back, whether it's like an Eastern Trail where you can use bike and pedestrian, or some sort of passenger rail, bringing that back. And it's kind of where the meeting ended, and where most of the Q&A section was primarily focused on those two separate kind of advocacy groups pitching their cases for rail lines or bike pedestrian.
Quite contentious.
Yeah, I don't know. I went in thinking the biggest I don't know, you think either car or public transit or would be more of a butting heads, but it was really the bicycles and the train, which I was kind of taken aback by. And actually, there is one other thing, I don't know if we've talked about plan or connect 2045. We provided the link to a website, but it's just the long range transportation plan for Greater Portland, focusing on emission reductions and financially constrained projects. And that was it overall. I thought it was pretty informative, very large showing. I go to most of those events, and that was probably one of, outside of maybe the gubernatorial debate, that's probably the most well attended event. So a lot of people were interested.
I think, it does seem like those events are really informative and, I think the only one I had gone to the one with the Downs in Rock Row, that was pretty, busy too, but it seems like that they have good topics, they really do, so. It is,
Yeah, they definitely really try to keep, topics that people would be interested in.
yeah,
To hear about.
great. The only thing I guess I would add, is a little bit of background on that. The 2045, and I know, Jen had to do her part probably from the Portland point of view, but. I can tell you from Scarborough, it happened during our transition where, we did not have a planner at the time when we were asked to. Provide a list of our transportation needs, to 2045, which, was all directed towards. Our planning director, so it was kind of in a black hole a little bit. But I engaged kind of late in that process and saying, okay, wait, we gotta catch up here and what's happening. I don't want to miss the boat. So we were able to make comments on the draft plan and making sure it was understood that Scarborough actually had just gotten funding for our transportation plan and study. And so for me to just come up with a list of projects really made zero sense. And I think I will say we were not alone. I think Scarborough and South Portland was a very strong voice in that as well, saying we're just not going to throw stuff and let's see what sticks against the wall. It should make sense. And so there were some language changes that I said, like I said, that our two communities kind of were the force to kind of put in there to make it understood that on a annual basis, we can kind of revisit and see where these plug in. So really what we put out there is once we have our townwide transportation study, we can kind of revisit back to the plan. That'll be a continuous kind of live document and updating it. They had to provide, though, for federal funding, essentially showing the need, right? And so there's always a need. And obviously probably Portland alone could have come up with the need, right?
Yeah.
So wasn't worried about that. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't etched in concrete that these are the projects. And we were able to confirm that and make sure that we have a seat at the table. And there were, like I said, there's a lot of other communities that were in the same boat as us. In larger communities, like I said, South Portland was in the same situation. So it'll be something that this group will again have to discuss as we go through, once we finalize our plan, what we would want to try to advocate for through the 2045 plan and updates, and trying to prioritize our projects in the future through that plan. So just wanted to bring that up because, like you said, if you go to probably that document, it's very general. It talks about lots of different things. And in the back, there's an appendix that lists projects, just to show the need. And so you will find there's quite a few communities that are not on there in our region, but I think if you read through the document, it just makes sense that that progresses over time.
And there's like no Scarborough project.
Right, and there's probably no, I don't know, South Portland projects or no Cape projects or no Gorham projects or no, you know what I mean? There's lots of other communities. So I think the language in it makes it flexible. So that we can add projects, but like I said, I would rather have informed prioritization of those projects to kind of put out there. So that's where Scarborough was ended up.
I remember we had a meeting a while back. Where somebody came and spoke to us about all the different transportation entities.
Yep.
In the greater Portland area. And it seemed to me. That the biggest. Challenge is to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, when it comes to money, I mean, yeah, we're all in there fighting for every dollar.
Yeah.
in Those meetings, yes.
You know, like say like a Boston has,
So we're never gonna come to complete agreement, yeah.
yeah, the biggest cities have these, like an
Yeah.
agency that just handles everything.
Yeah, well, Portland is the evil empire.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
but that's the issue
Not
though.
wrong.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
But also has, you know. Portland has over here, and Scarborough has over here. You know, Portland has the resources for that. So if there's a
Yeah.
staff vacancy, that's not stopping Portland's. Submissions
Oh, man.
to
Agreed.
GPCOG for
Yep.
these programs. And so. Yeah, it's bigger, there's more people, but the projects that get put forward are done so. Into this regional plan because they carry some sort of regional significance.
Or even how we manage it, to your point, like for Scarborough, it's a lot to take on a PAX project right now, like Gordon Road's a PAX, we're getting
Yeah.
PAX funding. It's me.
Yeah.
So for me, like you said,
Also applying for
Portland
funds,
can have
it's
10
easier.
PAX projects. It's
I
a
don't
lot.
think we could even handle.
I
that.
think I stretch myself where I'm always trying to grab for money and try to figure out, I'm like, okay, we can do this. And we've had, 2 or 3 PAX projects at a time. Because I'm never gonna leave money on the table, but to Jen's point, we don't have the staff really capacity
yeah.
to do that
Yeah.
continuously.
It's very hard to keep up with both ends of that, like, hey,
Yeah.
apply for more money,
Yeah.
and then, hey, hurry up and spend your money. And also
Yeah.
do these other 100 things.
Yeah, and that's a reflection of basically New England culture too,
Yeah.
local control,
Mhm.
where you don't see that around the rest of the country.
We also have smaller communities, so, this is a smaller, Portland's the big city, but it's not even that big.
Yeah.
And
Right,
so,
right.
there's other places
neighborhood
where
in Boston.
the whole city would cover, you have a city that's actually the size of the GPCOG
Yeah.
area, and in
How about
that
the
way.
state?
Yeah, I mean, same thing, it's similar, so I think that's really good, I think that's a good way to go about it, because frankly. Who really does know? Who really does know what your needs are going to be? Solidly in 20 or 30 years from now, from a transportation standpoint. And to think that through one cycle of a funding application, you could either lock in or lock out communities for
Right.
certain projects is just really short-sighted, and I don't think that anyone would let that happen necessarily, but it's a good way to just like raise our hand and say like, hey, we've got some other things going on here, just give us a minute, and we'll chime in when we have something that we know that is really, worthy of funding. Great. Thanks for going into that, Craig.
Yeah, that was great.
for,
Yeah.
Taking notes and filling us in.
We'll reimburse you for the cost, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Nick? All right, see that?
Yeah. cash and check.
You're gonna be on budget line now.
The next item is an update from Angela on the Eastern Trail Close the Gap project.
Yeah, I wanted to give this group an update so that you're in the know and have all the facts, because I think there's a lot of misinformation and miscommunication out in the public right now. And I know, the Eastern Trail Alliance actually approached, council during open public comment requesting an audience for a workshop with, our town council. And so I just wanted to give, I guess, a status update of where we're at, because I would say that the support, not only from council, from staff, from DOT, has not waned whatsoever. I was just going through today, the DOT, their 3-year work plan. Full funding is in there. They have 2 segments. That you will look through is the largest chunk, I think, in that work plan is coming to the Close the Gap project. Town staff has been working for the past, I guess now 3 years on right of way. We have had individual property owners that have been difficult to come to agreement with. And we're also working within the parameters of federal funding, which has very, very strict guidelines and criteria on how you negotiate right of way. Because as you can imagine, all the corruption that can happen when you're dealing with offering people money for their property. There's a lot of federal rules and regulations that can jeopardize your entire project if you misstep what's in any way. Federal funding goes away. So it's something that we take very seriously and have to navigate that very carefully. I will say the property owner that we had the longest duration for conversations with happened to be in South Portland. So we had limited abilities also to even talk about, well, no one wants to talk about eminent domain. It was not even in that conversation or purview because Scarborough doesn't have that ability to take property in South Portland. South Portland is also a partner and has contributed to a lot of money towards this project as well. So while they're trying to help us through, I think what happened, and I know you probably, this group has saw on the news, maybe it was last fall, kind of on the news, there was kind of announcing we're ready to get started. Unfortunately, that was premature. And so now that word was out there. And what has happened is we have crossed a big hurdle, I will say, in getting the individual landowners secured for property rights for right of way, which now means we're circling back to the 2 big kind of quasi-public or more public entities, which is CMP, which has a whole new staff or people that we're dealing with. So we're not exactly, Jay has been part of that, helping actually that part of the conversation. It is helpful to have Jay now at CMP. And I think we'll get there. It's just re-educating, like, oh, this is where we're at kind of thing. So I think that is not as big of a hurdle as the other one, which is TANAT-AM, which railroads are notorious for trying difficult when you're dealing with projects anywhere near a railroad, has been bought by a new company. So we are literally starting from zero with them, trying to get, and we are putting a bridge across the railroad tracks. So hopefully they're open to it. We have to start those conversations. Unfortunately, yes, that's the big hurdle right now, is trying to get that those negotiations completed. And Tom Hall is taking the lead on that, and is definitely trying to push this through as fast as possible, and having those conversations, because we all want this. This is something we've been put a lot of time and effort and money towards. So there is no wavering on that. I just wanted to make sure, I guess, you guys are understood where we are in the facts with that. I am hopeful that we can kind of move that forward in the next few months, that we can get that out to construction this year. That is definitely the goal still. We have our design engineers finalizing the plan and bid specs, so that as soon as we get the ink on the paper, that we're out for bid. So trying to line that all up. But that's pretty much the status and where we're at right now.
When you say you're starting from scratch with the new
Well,
entity, are you into the negotiations?
so I am not in
Not you
negotiations.
personally, somebody.
at the
Connected
top,
with-
and, yep,
So there is, so it's not like it's at the very beginning.
no, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
You just
We
need to-
had initial we had gone pretty much to the point where, Pan Am was comfortable where we were talking about as far as, I think, safety features and things like that, because what you're talking about, these bridges, railroad safety is huge concern, and so the parameters and how you design around that is a big deal, and so I think we got there with the design, so I think we're not starting at zero, we're just saying, here's our design, and have them, they need to now kick the tires again, and I think we've got to a point where it was maybe Pan Am was comfortable, which, so I would hope another railroad would be at the same level, so I wouldn't say that we're at zero, where we have a design that we think meets safety standards for a railroad. And then the other thing with CMP, it's again, re-educating and saying, yes, we've gone through this design with CMP in the past, because essentially that bridge is going up to the same level as those high tension wires, and you can imagine the safety concerns around that. So the design is really crucial for them to kind of, again, just go through, dot the i's, cross the t's, and try to get through that.
So there, is it right of way certificates that are being, like, were they? I'm just trying to think of like where in the DOT very black and white project process that
Mhm.
falls, and maybe this is an anomaly because of those other two, abutters essentially that are probably more complicated than like a typical, project, but I guess my understanding is that like with a standard DOT project, you would, that requires right of way. Which by the way, just to vouch for this, DOT just is not shy about telling projects that if you need our right of way department to certify any right of way on your project, which means this process that Angela's talking about. It used to be a year, and now I think they tell people 18 months, that's
Yeah.
like how backed up they are, or more.
Yeah.
So it's not an exaggeration, and it does actually take that long or longer. But the outcome of that is like a right-of-way certificate where you have signed documents between the private property owner and municipality or DOT on what's going to happen, and hey, yep, we give you permission to work on this 18 inches of our land that's over the line kind of deal, or fully on someone's private property in the case of this project. So,
so you know,
oh yeah, we got that. So yeah, but I've also worked on projects before where we had right of way, been through right of way, finished it, all 12 to 18 months of it, had signed right of way certificates. And then a property changed hands, and there was a date in the original right of way certificate that expired, and we had to go back and do it again.
No citizens referendum.
No, thank goodness, I don't envy that team people. That's about as bad, I think, as it can go. Hopefully this one doesn't end up like that. But yeah, that's, I've heard that CSX is moderately better to deal with,
Okay, that's good news.
like a little bit.
And like you said, to Roger's point, we've gone through a full design that Pan Am was on board with.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get there pretty quickly. The goal is as quick as possible, and I will say that town staff is definitely pushing for that. I think it might have the perception, obviously, 3 years with no progress. It's not a good look. I totally understand that, but it's not that there's been no work on it, because there's been a lot of work happening trying to get this
before the
put
sale
forward.
of the railroad. What was your estimated time for something?
Say it again.
Before the sale of the railroad? What was your estimated time
Well,
that something would happen? In other words, how long is this delayed it? Because of the sale of the railroad?
I don't know if I can, I'm not part of the negotiations, but I will say that, when it was kind of announced on the news, it was when we had got one of the landowners that we were struggling the most with, so I was thinking like, oh, okay, we've got the big nut done, now it's smooth sailing. So I don't know how long that, I mean, I think that was thinking we'd go back and just get signatures and we'd move forward and we'd be out to bid.
Alright.
Right. I mean. We'll see, we're not at the end.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure this group understood that,
The only
that we are moving forward as fast as we can, and we still are definitely motivated and committed to this project.
The funding's still.
And the funding is still there.
It's not
Yeah.
material,
There,
it's just more paperwork. which-
yeah,
Well, and the longer it takes,
the more.
the funding doesn't change. So it's like 5 million's in the bank or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so more than that.
that's the next concern.
And
yeah.
then the longer it takes to get out to bid, construction costs almost never go down.
Right.
So, you know, it's almost always at that point, DOT and other partners being like, okay, well, now the bids came in up here and we have to make up the difference or cut or, I don't know.
Up the bridge after.
Yeah, you can't like cut out scope
Yeah.
on something that's. a
Yeah.
Something
connection.
like that linear, yeah, and I will say the DOT has been completely supportive, and as we've been working through, they are just as committed, and. I know DOT sometimes gets a bad rap, but this is one of their pet projects too, and it would just be a feather in their cap as well, once this gets built, so everyone's. Yeah, heading in the same direction.
The only reason I brought it up is because initially you said that a lot of people have been wondering what's going on.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering whether it would make any sense to publicize the, not blaming anybody, but just saying there's been a change and.
Well,
You know.
so it came up at council and Tom Hall provided in his update.
Nobody watches those.
Nobody
No
watches town
disrespect.
council.
Only transportation meetings. those get the
That's
high-
right, I mean, yeah.
You get the
Call
degree.
meeting.
Well, and I don't know what council's appetite is for a workshop, but that would definitely elevate it. But I think it would be a workshop on everyone on the same page saying, yeah, we all want this project from my understanding. So I don't.
This
know
would
if
also
they're-
be a chance for CSX, so what it is.
Yeah,
I don't know where they're out of.
But,
North Fork, Virginia.
but this could be good publicity for them. Because my impression is that, Pan Am did not, I mean, they didn't have a lot of friends around.
They burnt down the city and go back.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
that didn't go.
real like casual take on those. My experience and understanding was always that Pan Am wouldn't have cared about something like that. We don't care about what you
Yeah.
think of us in terms of like how we're
Yeah.
contributing this bike ped project to the community. Like we're a railroad company. And they
I
also,
think the phrase I always I got from them in the projects I've worked on is, we were here first before your road. That's the mentality. The
Very
railroad was here
old.
first, and that's how it works. And so you have to work around them.
and the new version or
So,
the
we'll
new
see.
update that I've heard anyway is.
So it's hopeful that you're saying now
CSX.
to be able to negotiate.
Right, we've heard
that.
Jeremiah's had meetings with CSX on a couple of things before them, and the version that I got was like, they don't even know what they just bought.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out what they've acquired in terms of facilities and assets and, however that plays out, but certainly. Somebody.
I mean, I think they're a sponsor on some PBS programs, so. They are. Pan Am never did. So they are concerned with their image.
That's good.
Angela, I do have a quick question. You had said at the beginning that the Eastern Trail had approached the town for a workshop, a shared workshop with council. Was that specifically on
Close the gap.
the, like, what's remaining of this project? Or like the process that's remaining on this project? What was the request? What would they be working on at the workshop?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was part of, open public comment, where everyone has for 3 minutes.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, they had, it sounded like were frustrated that it has not moved forward and was sounding concerned that Scarborough is not as motivated to move forward. So I guess that's why I'm talking to this group, because you guys are obviously big advocates for this as well. I have not heard any different from council, and I don't expect to. I don't know, Nick, if it has come up with a workshop with Eastern Trail or anything like that, and what the council's appetite is for that, but it
I think,
was.
I think it's timing is everything, right? And right now we're staring down the barrel of a budget, a school land deal and possibly bond issue. So I know getting workshop scheduled right during this time of year is going to be extremely difficult if it's not the highest of priorities. So
Well, it sounds like they're gonna cut your eggs and issues.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for that. Update.
I don't
Anything
have
else?
any public comment. I also just wanted to give you guys maybe a couple other updates in that, well. To request, we, at the end of the meeting, the public comment last month, Mike had mentioned about bike racks. Since then, I have communicated with Todd Sousa, is the Community Services Director. Him and I have gone through and looking at the facilities that he maintains and trying to look at closer the bike rack need, and where we have maybe excess bike racks in some locations that aren't being utilized, and to kind of redistribute. So that's one thing that Todd has actually brought forward. It's also talking about, I think out of the 12 facilities, there are 3 that don't have bike racks. Obviously, we'd be counting town hall in the public safety building as one if we put something here. Memorial Park is another, and then the hub. I think relocating a bike rack, I believe he was talking about from the co-op at the pier, moving one over to the hub, and then looking at working with the grant that I had brought to this group and working through it with Todd's operation budget, the current budget he has left for this year, and trying to incorporate the last 2. So he would has requested the ability to speak to this group next meeting in May, if you are open to that, and he can kind of walk through what he's thinking.
Did you say you put bike racks at the hub,
The hub,
like on Payne Road?
yeah,
People expected to ride out there?
Portia did. That's how this whole conversation
Portia
started.
did, and if her biggest comment.
That was
Like the bike rack would be the one.
The bike.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's how this whole conversation started, was she was upset when she rode her bike to the hub to, I think she was giving blood or something, and
Yeah.
there was no bike rack.
It was one way and the other. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
But it was
to
a
ride.
good conversation open up, because when you look at, because like, obviously, community services, maintains like the beach parking, and like I said, the co-op, all the parks,
Yeah, I mean,
and rec facilities. It's good, it's a good conversation to look at, where we have them and where the holes are and gaps. And so I think he was anxious to talk to you guys if you're open to having him join us in May.
Now, is there a bike club in Scarborough?
I don't know.
Because supposedly there's all these bicycle riders. in
yeah,
Scarborough.
those are cyclists. That's different than bike riders.
Mhm.
They're a little bit of different market, because you have people like, take your kids to the park,
Yeah,
but they're just riding from point A to point B.
well, what I was getting at is if there's I would find out if there's a bike organization, group of people.
It was a Portland Bellow, that's.
That, no, like live in Scarborough, who, and get them, remember I said, get them to. Install the bike racks. Get the manufacturers like we did with the playgrounds.
Mhm.
At the schools many years ago. Get the enthusiasts to help defray some of the cost of doing this.
But those might not be the people who are.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
I think
Find
it's
out.
different groups, and I
Sure.
think that on some level, I feel pretty strongly that the town, we provide. Parking and like safe accommodations for people to get to these public facilities. However else they get there, we're starting to add EV chargers at different places for people that drive EVs. We don't go to the EV owners and say, hey, put in your own chargers. Right, we're doing that, and a bike rack is a drop in the bucket compared to some of the investments, I think, associated with some of these other modes of transportation. There are other ways, like, yeah, for sure, that's, I think, where it makes sense to engage advocates to help support that, either financial or otherwise. I think it's a good idea, but I think, case in point, we require this on the planning board of every new project that comes in, and yet for our own facilities, we don't even provide that. And so I think that I've been trying to think of like other grant opportunities, or like how can we fix this problem? I think Todd's like, that's actually in a nutshell, that's like my mental image of community services is just like, they can connect dots like that and make things happen and have a good handle on resources and reallocate things where they need to be. And so, yeah, I think it would be great to hear from him.
And I think, yes, he also is motivated and sees the need. And they're also, understaffed and trying to do a lot. And so that's where engineering department is now stepping in and saying, let's help. The two of us together can assist and get kind of
Sure.
a bigger picture and look at where the need is, what we can do about that. So I think we have a plan, and just wanted to kind of lay that out, I guess, for this committee.
For a long time, I don't know if it's still in effect, but we used to get charged with developers like $500 per residential unit for a recreation.
There is a rec fee, yeah.
Where'd that money go?
It is in the bank still. It's collected.
I always ask, because at one time the PTO came.
Yeah.
And they were asking, can you donate to our playground? I'm like, well, I just wrote out a check. And they were like, what do you mean? And then I was told at the time, by the time I said, well, that goes in the general fund. So.
It is
Right, but I'm just saying, it was collected with an
Yes, it
idea
is
that
collected.
supposedly it would go to recreational, like a bike rack or a picnic
Right,
table.
there's
a
also,
Garbage can.
we also collect fees for multimodal use.
Yes.
This is the mode, this is the multi-mode.
Right,
right. And to Jen's point, yeah, I think you brought up, I think that's a good one. Like we do for the planning board process, there is an in lieu fee for multimodal if you're gonna do. I think you paid into for the bus shelter or sidewalks, or as you said, bike rack could be the
Yeah.
same type of thing if the planning board sees that. That's a better use than the location that they're at or the use that they have. So I think that reserve account is in place. There's also, like you said, the rec account, which I know Todd again is working. I think there might be something in the budget that he was talking about, trying to figure out how to utilize some of those funds. And I think that's all going through council. I don't know if Nick is.
Yeah, Nick had a question
Part of-
or comment.
Do we have a list or an ask for these items? So like you want a bike rack somewhere. Do we have like a prioritized list of that already ready to roll? And is that part of the budget process that staff goes through with Tom?
So right now, we have a need at 3 locations. And that's where I think looking at it in the current operations budget and then trying to offset it with grants, which I believe we just missed one window. They have continuing grants. So I think Todd was looking at how he could do that through his operation budget rather than, it's not at this point a big enough kind of request for a CIP.
Right.
So it was really looking at is how we can incorporate it into the operation. And also as we move forward with upgrades, as Todd comes through and community services looks at implementing their facility master plan or their parks master plan. I was talking with Todd about that, and there's different playground updates and things like that he's got in the works. That bike racks is just part of that conversation. It's just needs to be baked into it. And it's, to your point, Jen, it's not a huge expense. It's to making sure it's not the thing that gets cut,
Right.
because it's in a larger project, it's pretty minimal, right? And so that's where we're looking at opportunities when you're doing a project to incorporate it.
Yeah.
Sort of like how a project comes in front of the planning board, but then to add a bike rack at that
Yeah,
time,
it's nothing.
not a big deal.
Right. Like four
Or not
bullets.
as big of a deal as it would be, yes.
Yeah.
on the road. So that's kind of, I think the immediate need, to answer your question, Nick, was the 3 locations is the immediate need that we're trying to figure out if we can address it through this operating budget for the 23 budget. And if it lingers into 24, it would probably be doable because it's only like 1 or something. But I think as we go through his parks plan, we can identify some more locations that make sense.
Okay.
And then there's some areas that we don't control, apparently, that Todd was saying are controlled by other entities that probably also make sense to have bike racks, but they're not in our purview, and so we can even start looking at those. See what,
Okay. Great.
so I'm still not seeing any public, but so. As for next month's agenda, it looks like if you guys are willing to have Todd come in and talk about bike racks. And also hoping there might be an update from about bike byways subcommittee charge.
Yeah.
You guys have something drafted that we can kind of noodle as a group.
Sure, we'll have that for next time.
Okay.
I have 2 other things.
Okay.
One, in addition to, legislation that I mentioned that was presented earlier today about statewide Vision Zero, there was also a topic on the Transportation Committee's agenda in Augusta today about an option for allowing municipalities a certain level of flexibility, you know about that?
It made me cringe. Are you talking about the speed
To
limit?
adjust speed limit, yeah. And I'm just, as like a point of awareness, I don't even know how it went, but I know that speed limits have come up to this committee before, in the past, and a lot of times, or most of the time, our answer is we have no say over what the speed limit is because that's DOT's jurisdiction. And so, anyway, there's effort afoot by someone else to take a closer look at that. And I think the idea is to consider how this may be, how an option may be provided to a municipality to adjust that without having to go through the entire DOT process. That's my very
We'll work you in.
understanding of it.
Well, I guess it came out with, there are like 3 pieces, I think that you said that were in front of the transportation committee. I think all 3 today. One is on transit,
And there was a transit one, yeah.
and then there was the Vision Zero Task Force, and then there was this, that allows to grant municipalities that authority to lower speed limits by
By a certain amount
certain
on
amount.
certain roadways, yeah.
down to, so reading through it. I think there's some flaws in that as far as lowering it to a point where PD can't enforce it, so that's that piece. There's also, if that does, this is a good group to talk about that with though, because as Jen said, there's a huge demand because everybody wants their road to be 25 miles an hour. So we would have to be prepared for that in the fact that anyone could call a counselor and every road is 25 miles an hour.
Then we have a lot of vegetation.
Well, and there'd be a lot of speeding tickets, maybe try, or maybe that puts the burden on police, not necessarily engineering, right?
Plus, Nick would never get home.
Right.
That was your- oh,
And
We're in
that's where I was
process,
going
right.
with it, exactly.
So
it would be very, very crucial if something like this moves forward, that this group maybe start that conversation about a policy around it and what that would look like, kind of like you said about, so we don't have mid-block crosswalks everywhere. There's need in certain
35,
locations,
35.
but not every location, right?
The legislation being presented, as I understand it, even included ADT, I think, so it can't even apply to roads over a certain volume of traffic.
Do you know, so it must not include state roads though, right? Or is it state roads in compact is under our control?
Yeah, I forget what the classification is. It was like a handful of different,
Okay,
if you, on this type of road for this amount of volume that we don't otherwise control. And then there's other pieces to it, like there's study components, like you have to provide reporting on that
For a
for
5-year
a couple of
basis,
out years so that you can document, like, did it work, did it not work, kind of thing. So anyway, more to come
Yeah.
on that. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere, I don't know, but I know, actually to unrelated, unprompted, Craig's statistics that he included in the summary, which are pretty widely known in terms of the safety benefits for driving at slower speed. It shouldn't be a big surprise that a topic like this is
Yeah, 40%,
Take it.
40 miles an hour is 10%.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you're going 80 then, for all intents and purposes.
well, I mean.
I think the numbers keep running.
Percentage wise, yeah.
It goes back to Down to 9% and 8%.
Yeah, at 60 miles an hour is probably zero.
So anyway, that's just something else happening out there in the world.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I wanted to bring up to this group, and we'll mention it to a couple of other circles of which I'm a part here. On June 7th and 8th in Skowhegan is the state's Build Maine Conference, which is it's a 2-day event. You can look it up, Build Maine 2023. It's a conference where different panels of speakers are brought in each year, and in the last couple of years, they've really started having some really fun and interesting hands-on workshops. So like small group, we sit at a table and get out the maps and things like that. And it's so it's a good exercise. Yeah, it used to be in Lewiston, a little further. But anyway, there's often, Nick, I might send this to you, either to you for passing on to the council, or maybe I'll just go send to the whole council. I know there were a couple of councilors last year that I reached out to about it, but I kind of give them short notice and I wasn't surprised that no one could make it. But it's just a really great panel of speakers and activities around good development and a lot of housing talk, but also, a lot of housing talk and how that ties into all the other topics that come across this committee and our other committees so frequently. And one of the things that I really like about this conference is that I feel like they do a good job at balancing, there's always one session where folks from the DOT speak and folks from different economic development groups come, and there's private developers, but they also do a really good job, I think, at bringing in folks from not here to talk about lessons learned and successes in other parts of the country. In ways that are just really, I feel like they're carefully curated so that they're sort of relevant to our conversation. It's not like, hey, this is how we built a high rise in New York City, it's like not really relevant. And anyway, it's just a great event, and it's well put on, well organized. And there's always great people that you meet there that, from other parts of the state or country. And so I'll send out some more information on that. Oh, but maybe the most important part of that is that I almost forgot. Scarborough continues to be a sponsor of this event, as the town has been in years past. And with that sponsorship comes free registration for any town staff, counselors, and committee or board members. So if anyone is interested in going, your registration fee can be covered by the town. Contact Angela or someone else to see how to do that.
We get unlimited tickets.
You're not getting hotel.
No.
I would say they usually, I think
It's
I
so
need to
easy.
go one day, because one day is more of a like a workshop thing. then-
Wednesday before, yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
there's
so-
usually like an outside, like a pop-up demonstration, if you've never done, that's actually would probably be relevant and interesting for this group, if you were thinking of going, they always have these pop-up, like, safety demonstrations where it's like, hey, if we were gonna, here's our design, we're gonna temporarily install these improvements and then monitor it for the day and see how it goes. And then the second day is kind of like the more banner, the banner day, I guess, with.
This
like
definitely sounds like a
presentation.
liaison activity to
You
me.
know, speak.
You know what this group would be, could benefit from? People like Autumn, who has been, you know, in a different environment,
Hmm,
to just give a perspective, because I think we tend to live up here, like, I don't know if you recall, if you noticed it, but at a recent meeting, we were talking about this congested traffic, and I said to her, do you think do you think we have a traffic
yeah,
problem?
and she laughed.
And she laughed, you know? Because I don't think we do either,
Yeah.
all right?
It's
And,
relevant.
Yeah.
but to some people, it's horrible, all right? And it would be good to get, especially people like her, and maybe actually some of the other department heads who will come here to work from out of other states, that give a different perspective, and I'm sure there's other communities.
Yeah, I mean,
in the
it's,
same-
there's been. The standout speakers actually was a private developer from the Buffalo area, like this little, I say little, just probably my size, is sort of like unassuming young woman, and, you know, got up to give her presentation, and she was a very eloquent, very experienced, presenter, but developer, and so she was talking about all these properties that she developed and how she had done that with the buy-in, grassroots buy-in from the communities. I don't know, anyway, so just like, and all the, you know, all the things that have to fall into place for projects to be successful and for neighborhoods to adopt them and not feel like projects or improvements are sort of put upon them, like how do you, there's always some themes around that every year. And so, yeah, I've seen, you know, there's you'll see familiar faces there if you go, for sure, but anyway, it's just a great event, and it's coming up in June, so I thought I would mention it.
Yeah, and so
Tell Autumn
it's-
I'm recommending.
No,
we
no,
should go out to,
It's essentially a planner conference that they are able to, as Jen said, they do it in a way that then touches on
Feel like
traffic.
a planner.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, at the core, it's a planner conference. However, they pull in, like I went last year, I've done a few times when they were in Lewiston also. I think because Dan made me. First, but you kind of, they do a really good job to that point of pulling in different perspectives. Like I said, I think last year was someone from somewhere in Pennsylvania that gave a really great talk too, and it's more from like you said, development planning, but they have economic development there and engineers there, because like you said, DOT does a presentation, so they're really good about talking about, okay, planning world includes all these other fingers, right? And kind of weaving that together. I think they do a good job kind of weaving that all together. We'll say that.
There's some policy threads too,
Yeah.
you know, like.
Yeah, funding.
Hey,
yeah,
I found out I
yeah.
couldn't do this in my community, so I went and we adjusted the ordinance,
Yeah.
and now this is what happens. you know,
but
that kind of thing.
the good, the benefit of having somebody like Autumn, or somebody who's actually working here now, who has spent most of their career someplace else,
Mhm.
especially out of state, in fact, out of New England, okay? And if they've had some time working here now, they may see things that we're trying to do that if we did it a different way, it might be more beneficial.
Yeah.
Instead of, if you keep hearing the same people talk about the same things all the time.
That's why I think it would be great for more than just our staff to go, so it's committee and
So in the
council
past,
members
yeah, staff.
to hear sort of some of those fresh ideas. That's,
But it is
really valuable.
specifically like that with our city, it's a municipal sponsor that we do, it's unlimited, like she said, for staff, for counselors. And for geared towards planning board members specifically too. but also trying to, I think we have long range planning, and to that point, you're kind of pulling in, like, most communities don't have as many committees as we have. That kind of focused on these kind of things and kind of how it all plays into like the planning and growth and development conversation. So,
So we get an extra stipend if we sign up for this?
you, no.
I want the bike tour though.
Lunch.
There is a bike tour.
Oh, we don't have to bring along
One
lunch.
is fiscal. That's a-
It's always really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
But I should say this to Nick, though, there are counselors from other communities, we
Yeah.
just haven't had any from Scarborough.
Maybe
I
we
think
could
I
say
met
that-
some
we
from
could-
Gorham
we
and
could say we're
Westbrook
for it.
last year.
Doing the workshop on transforming commercial streets.
You know, that's the one I want to hear about,
Yeah.
I would love to.
transforming
People
commercial
want to
streets,
look up to it, speak.
i.e. Route 1 and Scarborough.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about that.
Good people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
So, yeah, let Autumn or I know if anybody is interested, and I know she can roll this out to, the planning board and long range planning. For the other.
Great. Yes, are there any other comments? Anyone else before we depart? Great.
Hey.
Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 23rd.
Yeah.
And so we'll see you then. Motion to adjourn. Great.
Angela, can you get these in larger?
Great.
Things so we don't have to keep
Thanks, Nick.